In the past as well, the Americans have repeatedly threatened in their statements that all options are on the table. All options means including the option of war. The Americans should also know that if they start a war, this time it will be a regional war.
Tehran's deadly crackdown on protesters has been in the news for a long time now. The United States has been closely watching developments in Iran since anti-government protests erupted. Since then, President Donald Trump has repeatedly threatened the Khamenei regime with possible U.S. action in response to the regime's bloody suppression of demonstrators, which has reportedly left more than 6,000 people dead. Trump's massive armada has already arrived in Middle Eastern waters. The USS Abraham Lincoln and guided missile destroyers have reached the region, giving the United States the capability to strike Iran. On January 28th, Trump even categorically threatened Iran with another attack and warned that this time it would be worse than Operation Midnight Hammer. He also warned Tehran about the ticking clock and urged it to come to the table and make a deal of no nuclear weapons. Days later, on February 1st, Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei issued an ultimatum to the United States saying, "Americans should know that if they start a war, this time it will be a regional war."
As you can see, sometimes they try to stir up talk of war, saying we have such and such planes, we have this and that, we can do this. This isn't new either. In the past as well, the Americans have repeatedly threatened in their statements that all options are on the table. All options means including the option of war. They've always said all options are on the table. Now it's the same. They keep making these claims. But what did we do? We didn't back down. Our dear people of Iran shouldn't be frightened by these things. The Iranian nation is not influenced by these tactics. We do not shy away from standing up for what is right, but we are not the ones to start anything. We do not wish to oppress anyone, nor do we want to attack any country. But when it comes to someone who has the intention to attack, to cause harm, the Iranian nation will respond with a firm fist, let it be known. That is our style. Of course, the Americans should also know that if they start a war, this time it will be a regional war.
In several consecutive posts, Khamenei reiterated his stance, saying, "Americans shouldn't try to intimidate the Iranian nation with naval, troop, or aircraft buildups." The Iranian Supreme Leader's comments came after Trump again threatened Tehran with big, powerful ships heading in their direction. On another note, President Trump also told reporters that Iran is seriously talking to the U.S. as military action looms.
Sir, could you give us an update on where your thinking is right now with Iran, if you have made a final decision on what you want to do?
I mean, I certainly can't tell you that, but we do have very big, powerful ships heading in that direction, as you know. I can't tell you,
Okay.
but I hope they negotiate something that's acceptable.
Saudi Arabia's defense minister reportedly said that if the U.S. backs off the strike, that will only embolden Tehran. What's your reaction to that, sir?
Well, some people think that, some people don't. If you could make a negotiated deal that would be satisfactory with no nuclear weapons, they should do that, but I don't know that they will, but they are talking to us. Seriously talking to us. Look, we have a lot of things happening right now with Iran. We have a tremendous fleet going in that direction, and they're talking to us. So a lot of things could happen.
Meanwhile, a U.S. Navy destroyer stationed at Israel's Eilat port was observed entering the Red Sea on February 1st. Israel said the deployment was pre-planned as part of ongoing U.S.-Israel military cooperation. The move comes as Trump pressures Iran over a nuclear deal. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi condemned the U.S. military buildup in the Persian Gulf, calling it unjustified interference in Iran's defense activities near its waters. Sharing a map on X, he wrote, "Operating off our shores, the U.S. military is now attempting to dictate how our powerful armed forces should conduct target practice in their own turf." He slammed U.S. Central Command's appeals for Iranian professionalism, while the U.S. and EU continue to label the IRGC a terrorist group, calling the contradiction the level of absurdity the world is now facing. The EU designated Iran's IRGC a terrorist group on January 30 over its deadly crackdown on protesters, saying repression cannot go unanswered.
In Iran, horrific crackdown on protesters has come at a heavy human cost. The EU already has sweeping sanctions in place, and today ministers agreed to designate Iran Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist organization. This will put them on the same footing with Daesh, Hamas, Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda. Those who operate through terror must be treated as terrorists. Ministers also imposed sanctions on those responsible for the brutal crackdown of protests, including the Minister of Interior. Repression cannot go unanswered. Beyond this, ministers adopted new sanctions on those involved in Iran's war support to Russia and expanded export controls. Ministers were clear that Iran must release all those unjustly detained, including the European Union citizens. Going forward, we must be ready to further increase pressure on the authorities and continue supporting Iran's civil society.
Meanwhile, in a Senate hearing, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio called the Khamenei regime weaker than ever and explained why Iran's economy is deteriorating. He accused the Iranian government of spending its money on weapons and funding terrorist organizations.
Just very briefly, we've heard such differing accounts, and the president has spoken strongly, you have as well, on the deaths in Iran and the horrible atrocities that are being committed. Can you give us some sense of, we see reports of thousands, tens of thousands. What's the State Department's best estimate of what's happened on the ground?
Well, in the thousands for certain. And look, I think regimes, including that one in Iran, have learned that when you start shooting people in the head with snipers, it's effective. I mean, it works, and they've done it, and it's horrifying. And that's what we've seen. That regime is probably weaker than it has ever been. And the core problem they face, unlike the protests you saw in the past on some other topics, is that they don't have a way to address the core complaints of the protesters, which is that their economy's in collapse. And the reason why there's economies in collapse is because they spend all their money and all their resources building weapons and sponsoring terrorist groups around the world instead of reinvesting it back into their society. And as a result, have taken on massive global sanctions, which has isolated their economy and their country. And so that's what the Iranian people are demanding, is that they stop doing that and start caring about them and get these sanctions off them. And this regime is unwilling to do it. So the core challenge is the protests may have ebbed, but they will spark up again in the future, because this regime, unless they are willing to change and or leave, have no way of addressing the legitimate and consistent complaints of the people of Iran who deserve better. On the issue of our presence in the region, here's the baseline I want to set for everybody. The baseline is this. We have 30 to 40,000 American troops stationed across 8 or 9 facilities in that region. All are within the reach, theoretically, not theoretically, in reality, all are within the reach of an array of thousands of Iranian one-way UAVs and Iranian short-term ballistic missiles, short-range ballistic missiles that threaten our troop presence. We have to have enough force and power in the region, just on a baseline, to defend against that possibility. That at some point, as a result of something, the Iranian regime decides to strike at our troop presence in the region. The president always reserves the preemptive defensive option. In essence, if we have indications that, in fact, they're going to attack our troops in the region, to defend our personnel in the region. We also have security agreements, the Defense of Israel Plan and others, that require us to have a force posture in the region to defend against that. And so I think it's wise and prudent to have a force posture within the region that could respond and potentially, not necessarily what's going to happen, but if necessary, preemptively prevent the attack against thousands of American servicemen and other facilities in the region and our allies. I hope it doesn't come to that, but that's, I think, what you're seeing now, is the ability to posture assets in the region to defend against what could be an Iranian threat against our personnel. They certainly have the capability to do it because they've amassed thousands and thousands of ballistic missiles that they've built. Despite the fact that their economy's collapsing, they keep spending money on that.